morning, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting of the Select Special Ethics Commissioner and Chief Electoral Officer Search Committee to order. I'm Tanny Al. I'm the MLA for Fort McMurray Wood Buffalo and Chair of the committee. I'd like to ask members and those joining the committee at the table to introduce themselves for the record, and then I'm going to call on those who might be joining us remotely. We're going to begin at my right.
Good morning, Glenn Van Dyken, MLA for Athabasca, Barhead, Westlock.
Shane Getson, MLA, Lexington and Parkland.
Nolan Dick, MLA for Grand Prairie.
Angela Pitt, MLA, Airdrie East.
Chelsea Petrovic, MLA, Livingston McLeod.
Janice Irwin, Edmonton Highlands Norwood.
Irfan Sabir, MLA Calgary Buller McCall.
You're right, MLA Edmonton Beverly Clairview.
Lauren Dack, Edmonton McClung.
Christina Steenbergen, LAO Communications.
Rhonda Sorensen, Manager Communication Services.
Lindsay Tischer, Director of Human Resources for Legislative Assembly Office.
Shannon Dean, Clerk of the Legislative Assembly of Alberta.
And Jody Rampel, Committee Clerk.
I'd note for the record that Mr. Getson is intended to be a permanent substitution for Mr. Stefan, and a few housekeeping items to address before we turn to the business at hand. Unless we move in camera, committee proceedings are being live streamed on the internet and broadcast on Alberta Assembly TV, and committee members are encouraged whenever possible to have your no one's going remote here. The audio and video stream and transcripts of meetings can be accessed via the Legislative Assembly website, and please set your cell phones and other devices to silent for the duration of this meeting. Would a member move a motion to adopt the agenda, please? Mr. Van Dyken moves that the Select Special Ethics Commissioner, Chief Electoral Officer Search Committee approve the proposed agenda as distributed for its May 8th meeting. All in favor of, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you so much. Next on the agenda, we're going to be discussing the recruitment of the Ethics Commissioner. To respect the privacy of the applicants, it would be appropriate to continue in camera for this portion of the meeting. Could I have a motion to that effect, please? Mr. Getson moves that the Select Special Ethics Commissioner and Chief Electoral Officer Search Committee, including the appropriate representatives from the Legislative Assembly Office, move in camera. All in favor of, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion is carried. All right, having moved back onto the record, does anyone have any comments regarding the draft report? Please go ahead.
Like now, the report is matter of public record.
Not yet. So,
Maybe someone wants to move a motion.
sorry,
and
so
then
what
that
we're
can
looking
be
for is someone to
discussed.
move a motion at this time to proceed.
And then the name's out there.
Mr. Van Dyke, can you put up the motion?
Yes, I can.
Did you want to read into the record, sir?
I'd like to move that the Select Special Ethics Commissioner and Chief Electoral Officer Search Committee, A, approve the draft report dated May 2024, B, recommend to the Legislative Assembly that Sean McLeod be recommended for appointment to the position of Ethics Commissioner for a 5-year term commencing on May 26, 2024, and subsection 2, that the Speaker be authorized to, on its behalf, enter into a remuneration agreement with the appointee as it relates to Mr. McLeod's appointment.
Mr. Dack?
Just a typo. Remuneration is spelled incorrectly.
Thank you. But they can still discuss it.
Any other concerns, comments while we correct that typo? Mr. Sabir?
Now that motion is moved. Now we can discuss the motion, right?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I will not be supporting this motion and will provide a minority report to indicate that I will not be supporting this motion. And let me share some reason that why I will not be supporting. I will start with a couple of quotes. First quote, through the work that this committee undertook in this search process, I felt that there were better qualified candidates that should have been put forward. I fear that the public may view this appointment in a negative light, thus actually creating more distrust here in Alberta, which is exactly not the intent of what we are supposed to be doing here today. I fear there could be a perception that the public will see that as a bias moving forward, again, not meant to be the intent of what this legislative office is meant to do. Mr. Chair, that's a direct quote from the member of Airdrie East from 2018 from another similar committee. And if only Albertan had the 28 version of the members standing up for their democracy today. Mm-hmm. Here is another quote. I reflect on the work that we have done as a committee here, and I believe that our role was to work diligently to find an individual that we could be confident in, that Albertan could feel confident that that individual was here to strengthen and protect democracy. I believe that what we need to do here is to find an individual that Albertan can feel confident in, that the individual will help to strengthen and protect our democracy here. Other individuals that we had come before us came forward without the history within this province, negative history, or however you want to describe that, and I believe carried as much capability and ability to fulfill the role. It does make me nervous going forward with recommending this individual, and I will not be supporting this motion. Mr. Chair, the above was a direct quote, a 2018 version of the member for Athabasca, Barhead, Westlock. And both of these comments, I guess, stand true today. And the reason for opposing this person appointment, I do understand that this person has a history of public service as deputy minister, as working in premier office for a special project. But the problem with this appointment is that there is well-documented history, and as a matter of public record, this individual ran as a UCP candidate in Edmonton Riverview, nominee candidate. Second thing, there is also record of public donations. And I think this is the office that also noted Premier that she contravened the Conflict of Interest Act just last year. And looking at this candidate's affiliation with the UCP doesn't give us much confidence that this is not a partisan appointment. I think it looks like that, again, it's just another attempt to control an independent officer of the legislature. We will be providing more detailed reasons in our minority report to elaborate why we are opposing this appointment and this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Any other concerns, questions, comments before we proceed?
Yeah, I just want to echo what my colleague, Member Sabir, has pointed out. I think, again, we can quote the very MLAs on this committee who used phrases, like he said, of I felt that there were better qualified candidates that should have been put forward, that the public will see this as a perception of bias. It's a clear bias. This is someone with a clear track record of political involvement, of donations, and we're not talking the 1970s, we're talking recent history here. And again, I want to put it on the record that I too am clearly opposed to the decision of this committee. Thank you.
Ms. Pitt?
I'd just like to say I'm very pleased with the committee's choice in the candidate that we've hired for this role. He was clearly the best person for the job based on his experience. I think that he will be a leader and an asset to Alberta elections over the course of his term. And I find it rich that the NDP have a comparison between a decision where they chose to hire a candidate that was fired from a position previous to that, and to compare the two is just absolutely insane. Sean McLeod has a very clear, precise record in his professionalism, and I take great offense, actually, to members of this committee casting a shadow in his integrity. So, but anyway, Mr. Chair, I'm very pleased with the deliberations. We've been here for quite some time. We've put quite a significant amount of effort into this decision, and I'm really pleased to have Sean McLeod on board as our new Chief Electoral Officer.
Stop.
You're-
I have somebody else here. Mr. Dack?
To Member Irwin, if I may.
Okay.
Thanks, Member Dack. Just to clarify, we are in no means attacking his integrity. We are outlining the fact that he has clear partisan involvement as recent as last year. So that is not an attack. That is not an attack on integrity. That is an attack on the fact that this is supposed to be a non-partisan role.
Ms. Pitt?
Here to clarify that acting with integrity in a non-partisan role is very possible and it is very possible, and I have all of the confidence in the world that Sean McLeod will act in a nonpartisan manner, and he's made that very clear throughout this process to members of this committee. And I'm very confident that he will, and I know that other members, the majority of this committee, believe that he can act in that nonpartisan capacity in this ethics role.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pitt. Mr. Dack?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think what we need to keep in mind always when we're choosing the legislative officers, in this case, the ethics commissioner, not the chief electoral officer, as the member for Airdrie seemed to indicate. We always need to keep in mind, Mr. Chair, that it is absolutely the perception of the public that has to be tantamount and paramount. And the public will look at not the integrity of the individual in this case when they consider the political activities that are on the public record. It's not about attacking the individual as a person. It's about the public's perception of what the role is supposed to envision, and that means totally devoid of any partisanship whatsoever. And the clear activities in terms of donating politically, in terms of acting in a political office, in terms of running as a candidate and then withdrawing as a candidate for the United Conservative Party. I mean, how in the world is the public going to have any faith that this individual is nonpartisan when, in fact, this person has been a partisan person right up to the recent past? And it is something that is a big mistake on the part of the majority of this committee to make this appointment. And I think that we're not casting shadows on Mr. McLeod. It's his own activities that cast that shadow in the minds of the public. And that's what we need to keep in mind. The sanctity of these offices is at risk when we make political appointments. And I fear that we're going down that road again in a deeper way than we even have in past Conservative appointments. This is really all about controlling legislative officers, and it's more than disappointing. It's an outrage.
Is there any other comments or questions? Ms. Pitt.
I must add that perhaps the NDP are upset about this appointment because they can no longer use this office for their partisan political attacks against what they see, or against the government, as they have in the past. And I'm really looking forward to Sean McLeod's integrity in this office and standing up against the political partisan attacks that the NDP have used this office for in the past.
Mr. Sabir.
I think that's going a bit too far, that even MLA from Airdrie East will suggest that in past any political party has used this office for political attacks. Most recently, Margaret Trussler was in that office, and they may not like the decision that she found based on evidence that Premier breached the Conflict of Interest Act. They may not like that that office found Minister of Municipal Affairs to have violated Conflict of Interest Act and investigated many of their colleagues. But I think saying those kind of things, that that office or Margaret Trussler was used for that kind of things, I think that's a bit too much. I guess members should reflect on it and apologize before being appointed to that position. She was serving as a justice in our court system for almost 30 years. So I hope that member reflects on her comments and thinks about it.
We have a motion on the floor at this moment, as provided by Mr. Van Dyken. I'm looking for a decision on that, so.
Chair, I think we've had some good, healthy debate. I think the opposition members obviously are going to put a minority report forward. I would anticipate they would probably have more to speak on this in the public eye or elsewhere. But right now, I think this group has done a lot of good deliberation, both in camera and out. We're at a point where the group has made a decision as the committee, and I would like to move that we call the question on the motion that's on the floor.
I'm fine with that. So with that in mind, the motion on the floor, as you folks see before you, can I get all in favor of the motion as advertised? Please say aye. All opposed? No. That motion is carried. All right, a recorded vote has been requested. Those in the room who are in favor of the motion or the amendment or this motion, please raise your hands.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have Mr. Van Dyken, Mr. Getson, Mr. Dick, Ms. Pitt, and Mrs. Petrovic.
Those in the room who are opposed to the motion, please raise your hands.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have Member Irwin, the Honorable Mr. Sabir, Ms. Wright, and Mr. Dack. So that is 5 in favor and 4 against.
That motion is carried. Thank you very much. I will table the committee's report in the assembly this afternoon. And I'd also now like to call on Ms. Sorensen to address the draft media release and social media postings regarding our recommendations for next ethics commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we've done in previous committees, Communications has prepared a news release publicly announcing the committee's decision to appoint or to recommend to the Assembly that they appoint the new ethics commissioner. Once the committee approves, we will send that out publicly.
Thank you so much for that. Are there any questions? If not, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the communications initiatives that we had discussed previously. Mr. Dick, go ahead.
I move that the Select Special Ethics Commissioner and Chief Electoral Office Search Committee approve the draft media release and social media posts as distributed.
All in favor of this motion, please say aye. All opposed, please say no. That motion is carried. Do members have anything else for discussion under other business? Seeing none, our next meeting has been scheduled for July 22nd, 2024. Would a member make a motion to please adjourn? Member Irwin moves that the May 8th, 2024 meeting of the Select Special Ethics Commissioner and Chief Electoral Officer Search Committee be adjourned. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you all very much.
You see, way before Europeans ever stepped foot in this land, it was used by many different First Nations. In fact, the Nahiawak had a word for this stretch of land that they called Pehonan, which roughly means a place to gather or a meeting place. And when they would meet here, they would hold marriage ceremonies, they would have annual celebrations like sun dances, they would discuss politics, and they would trade with one another. Now, speaking of trade, eventually, when the fur trade would move this far west, the Hudson's Bay Company would establish their fifth and final rendition of Fort Edmonton in a spot just south of where the legislature building sits today. And in its heyday, Fort Edmonton was a hub of trade between the European fur traders and the First Nations and Métis peoples. In fact, the Nahiawak came here so often they had a word to refer to Fort Edmonton, and that was Amisquachi Waskahagan, which roughly means Beaver Hills House. In fact, it's also important to note that the spot that the legislature sits and a large chunk of the province of Alberta sits on Treaty 6 territory, traditional home of many different First Nations and Métis peoples. Now, jumping forward a little bit, when the fur trade would end, settlement would begin to rise in the Prairie West. And before Alberta was a province, it belonged to the Northwest Territories of Canada. And only after years and years of campaigning for provincehood did the federal government finally grant the request. And on September 1st, 1905, the provinces of Saskatchewan and Alberta were formed. Now, in Alberta's case, they needed a capital city. So a few years later, in 1907, they started construction of the legislature building. In 1912, they officially opened the building, and ever since then, this spot has been the center of provincial democracy here in Alberta. So next up, we're going to take you inside the legislature, and I'm going to talk to you about an important figure in Alberta's past. Hello, and welcome inside the Alberta legislature. Now, when you visit the legislature as a guest, the first thing that you're going to do is walk through our security. And when you do, you'll look up and you'll see the statue of this lovely woman right here. Now, this is Princess Louise Caroline Alberta, and she is who our province is named after. She was the fourth daughter of Queen Victoria and a member of the British royal family. Now, Louise wasn't your typical royal. In fact, in those days, she was known as a bit of a rebel. She believed in women's rights and shared her opinions publicly, becoming a bit of an activist. She also rebelled against the royal norm when it came time for her to pick a husband. For royal standards, it was expected that she would marry a prince or someone else with royal blood, although none of the suitors at the time really met her standards for a match. So she married a man named John Douglas Sutherland Campbell, the Marquis of Lorne. He wasn't a commoner by any means, but he definitely wasn't someone who would be suitable to marry a princess like her. So to help elevate his status, he was given the title of Governor General of Canada, and he served with that title from 1878 until 1883. While John Douglas was Governor General, he helped name parts of this country. In fact, he came to this part of the country, saw the Rocky Mountains, saw the beautiful land, and he said, "I want to name this land after something equally beautiful in my life, after my lovely wife, Louise." He went to the government at the time and he suggested that they name it Louise Land. Now, if you're sitting there thinking that's a terrible name, well, you're right, and the government at the time agreed with you. So they said, no, John Douglas, we don't like that name, try again. And Princess Louise was actually the one who got involved and said, if you're going to name it after me, can you use Alberta? Because not only does it honor me, it honors my father, Prince Albert, who she was very close to and who died while she was really young. So there you have it. That's why Alberta is called Alberta. So now that you know about our Princess Louise, it's time to take you inside the Alberta Legislature's rotunda.
This is the main rotunda of the legislature building. This is the first space you come into once you're finished with all the security. It's also where we hold lots of events and ceremonies throughout the year, including Celebrate the Season, which is a number of weeks in December where choirs and other musical groups can come into the legislature and perform right on our grand staircase. Now, you'll also see right behind me a fountain, which was first installed in 1959 to celebrate the first official visit of Queen Elizabeth II. And above our heads in the rotunda, you can see a bunch of flags. These flags are regimental standards. They represent different military units from here in Alberta. But what is the actual purpose of the legislature building? Well, this is the home and workplace of our provincial government. This is where the laws that govern Alberta are debated and made by the members of the Legislative Assembly, or MLAs. These are the people elected to represent everyone across the province of Alberta. And they do all of this work right up the grand staircase and inside the chamber, which we'll be seeing later on today. The legislature didn't exist until 1912, but the Legislative Assembly wanted to start meeting as soon as 1906. So there was a number of years where they had to find other places to hold session. For most of those years, they met in the Mackay Avenue Schoolhouse, which is actually still standing just a few blocks from the legislature. But for the very first meeting, in March of 1906, they wanted to do something a little bit special. So they actually met in the local hockey rink, Thistle Rink. They covered up the ice with sawdust and carpets, and that's where the elected members sat. And 3,000 people from across the province came to watch and were seated up in the bleachers. It's part of why they chose such an unconventional location, because it could accommodate that many people who were excited to see their government in action for the first time. So our assembly moved from hockey rink to schoolhouse, and then finally around November of 1911, they started meeting here in the legislature building. But we've already said that the legislature wasn't completed until 1912, so they actually moved in a little bit before it was ready to go. And so during one of those first few months here, a bit of plaster actually crumbled off one of the pillars in the chamber and fell right next to Premier Sifton's head. He wasn't hurt. He did try to claim it was a plot from the opposition trying to take him out, it wasn't. That's just what happens when you move into a building that is still a work in progress. Despite that setback, the Legislative Assembly of Alberta has used this legislature building for session ever since. And it's also a place where members of the public can come in either to watch session in action or to come for a tour with myself and my colleagues. Now, we have one more statue to check out here on the main floor before we start moving up to check out the rest of the building.
Hello everyone, my name is Silverius and I'll be telling you all about our statue of Chief Crowfoot here. Chief Crowfoot was a head chief of the Niitsitapi as well as a signatory of Treaty Number 7. The Niitsitapi, or in English, the Blackfoot Confederacy, is a government or alliance of several First Nations found here in the province of Alberta. It's very similar to how a country might have several provinces, states, and territories. The Blackfoot Confederacy is made up of the Kainai, or Blood Nation, the Siksika, or Blackfoot Nation, and the Piikani, or the Northern and Southern Pagan Nations. And on Chief Crowfoot's statue, you can see several items that are very important to traditional Niitsitapi ways of life. So in his left arm there, he is holding a pipe bag, which likely would have held a pipe and a stem, as well as a little bag of tobacco. This is because in Niitsitapi culture, it's a very common practice, both historically and today, to exchange a small gift the very first time you meet someone. Just like how you might shake hands the very first time you meet someone. So the fact that we see Chief Crowfoot with his pipe bag likely shows that he was welcoming to and willing to work with new people. And because his statue is here in the Alberta Legislature Rotunda, it shows that the building and the people who work here are also welcoming to and willing to work with new people. In his right arm there, he's holding a riding crop. This is because horses in traditional Niitsitapi culture are a sign of wealth and status. And as an older man, Chief Crowfoot held very high status in his nation, owning several hundred horses at once. And it was this status, as well as some of his diplomatic qualities as a person, that eventually led him to becoming one of the head chiefs of his people. This is a little bit in contrast to his life as a younger man. As a younger man, we know Chief Crowfoot as a very intelligent and brave warrior. By the time he was 20 years old, he had fought in 19 battles and had gained several injuries and honors that helped establish that prestige later on in life. And it was this mix of qualities, it was the fact that he was both a warrior and a diplomat that eventually led him to becoming one of the head chiefs of his people and persuading them to take Treaty Number 7. Speaking of Treaty 7, in the center of his chest there, we can see Crowfoot wearing a treaty medal. This was given to him when he decided to mark Treaty 7. And Treaty 7 is one of the 3 major treaties found throughout the province of Alberta, the other 2 being Treaty 8 in northern Alberta and Treaty Number 6 right here in central Alberta, which includes the land the legislature building is built on. Now, at the time of their signing, there was a lot of reluctance and hesitancy from a bunch of different First Nations chiefs about whether or not they thought it was a good idea to take treaty. Chief Crowfoot decided to take treaty for a variety of reasons. One of those being the fact that the bison, which was a primary and traditional food source for the Niitsitapi, was gradually going extinct. Also, American traders were threatening traditional Niitsitapi ways of life by introducing things like whiskey and repeating rifles into their culture. But a few years before marking Treaty 7, Chief Crowfoot met and became friends with a man named James McLeod, who was an assistant commissioner for the Northwest Mounted Police. James McLeod, as well as a few other officers from the Northwest Mounted Police, helped the Niitsitapi chase those American traders back to the United States. And so, it was Crowfoot's good feelings towards the Northwest Mounted Police and the fact that he knew his world was gradually changing that led him to ultimately take Treaty 7 and convince his fellow head chiefs to do the same. The fact that we have Chief Crowfoot's statue here in the Alberta Legislature Rotunda reminds us that in Alberta, we all live on and benefit from treaty land. He also reminds us of the incredibly complicated histories of the treaties. These treaties helped with the foundation of very important institutions, like our very own government system. They also allowed many settlers, including our own ancestors, to make homes here in the province of Alberta. But of course, This was at the expense of the languages, cultures, traditional ways of being, and lives of many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. There is work being done to reconcile these histories and make living in Canada a more equitable place for everyone, including the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action. To learn more about these initiatives, as well as the histories of the treaties, you can look them up online. Now that we've looked at one of Alberta's prominent First Nations leaders, we're going to take a deeper look at the leader of Alberta's government system, the Premier.
Along this half of the third floor, we have our gallery of former premiers of Alberta. This gallery is set right in front of the Premier's office, which stretches off through the east wing of the building. These portraits are done as a way to commemorate a person's time as head of the provincial government. So traditionally, they aren't started until a person has finished their time in that role, however long that time may be. You can see in some of the more modern portraits that the premiers are able to personalize their paintings just a little bit. They're able to choose which artist does their portrait for them, and then they can communicate with the artist any symbols or elements that they would like to include. So how does a person become Premier of Alberta? Well, first you have to be made leader of a provincial political party, and then that party needs to win the most seats in the election. Of course, it's also important that a Premier run as an MLA in a specific constituency of Alberta. Although it's technically possible for a person to be Premier without being a member of the Legislative Assembly, it makes it very difficult to do the job when you're not able to sit in on the chamber during session. In Alberta, we don't set a maximum limit on how long a person is allowed to be in the role of Premier. Although we hold elections every 4 years or so, as long as a person maintains the confidence of their party and their party keeps winning the elections, sometimes a person can manage to stay Premier for a very long time. This is what happened with Premier Ernest Manning. He was in the role from 1943 to 1968. That's 25 years as head of the provincial government before he decided to step down. He also happened to be our youngest Premier when he was first elected. He was 34 years old. So that's part of why he had 2.5 decades to give to the position. Now that we've had a chance to explore some of the elected officials within the legislature, we're going to move around to the other side of this floor and talk about one of the unelected or appointed positions within our democracy.
The west wall of the third floor features portraits of Alberta's royal representatives, the Lieutenant Governors. If you look over here, you can have a peek inside the Lieutenant Governor's office. Unlike the Premier, the Speaker of the House, or the MLAs, the Lieutenant Governor isn't elected by Alberta citizens. Nobody votes for them in an election, they don't campaign, and they are not a part of any political party. They are appointed by the Governor-General of Canada based on recommendations from the Prime Minister. Lieutenant Governors can come from any background. What matters most when selecting a person for this role is the positive impact they've had on the province and its people. So, what does this figure do in our parliamentary system? First and foremost, they represent the Crown. Even though Canada is an independent nation, the monarch is Canada's head of state. The Crown holds certain constitutional and ceremonial responsibilities, including safeguarding our democratic system of government. The Crown's representative is at the very top of our system of government, even above the Premier. The Lieutenant Governor gives the provincial government the authority to exercise legislative, executive, and judicial powers. When the Legislative Assembly creates a new law, it must be approved by the Crown before it can become official. As the King lives halfway across the world, it is not possible for him to give his assent every time. So, the Lieutenant Governor stands in for him and provides royal assent.
The Lieutenant Governor fulfills other ceremonial duties within the legislature, such as delivering the speech from the throne during the opening day of the Legislative Assembly. This grand ceremony is one of the few times in the year when the Lieutenant Governor is permitted to enter the chamber. Because the Lieutenant Governor is appointed and not elected by citizens, they cannot step foot inside the chamber without permission. Once they are inside, the Lieutenant Governor reads a speech written by the current government that outlines their goals and intentions for the upcoming session. Once the speech from the throne has been read, session can officially begin. When a particular session has come to an end and the members have introduced, debated, and voted on all of the bills before the Assembly, the Lieutenant Governor officially ends or prorogues it. When it's time for a provincial election, the Lieutenant Governor also dissolves the legislature and announces the election date, which gets things rolling towards the day of the vote. You've probably noticed that a lot of our Lieutenant Governors are wearing the same outfit. This uniform is called the Civil Half-Dress Uniform, and it reminds us that the Lieutenant Governor started as a military position. That's also why you see them carrying a sword. And no, they never use the sword in any of the ceremonial duties. You've probably also noticed the gold embroidery. The gold embroidery on the jacket is in fact made with real gold. And even though these people represent the monarch, they still have to buy this uniform all on their own. Now this is a portrait of the Honorable Ralph Steinhauer. He was Canada's first Indigenous Lieutenant Governor and an elected chief of the Saddle Lake Cree Nation. As you can see, the Honorable Steinhauer changed this long-standing tradition of wearing the civil half-dress uniform and instead chose to wear traditional chief's regalia for ceremonies like speech from the throne and royal ascent. His regalia includes a full buckskin suit, a beaded tie, and a feathered headdress. Thanks to the Honorable Steinhauer, the Lieutenant Governor now chooses whatever form of dress they feel is appropriate. His decision shows how the Lieutenant Governor can be both a royal representative and a representative of the people of the province. We have something else in the building that represents the monarch. It's called the mace, and we'll learn about that next.
Next up on our tour of the Alberta Legislature, we're going to look at some objects that play an important role in our daily proceedings. First up, we're going to look at Alberta's mace. Now, I know what you're wondering. Why do we have a big fancy gold club? I mean, yes, it looks nice, but what purpose does it serve the legislature? Well, the mace, believe it or not, is actually an incredibly powerful symbol. It represents the monarchy itself. But more than that, it symbolizes the fact that the monarchy has given us, the people, the authority to govern ourselves. So since it represents all of us as a province, we wanted to make it as nice as possible. In 1956, we commissioned this mace for a budget of around $3,000. In 1956, that would be like buying a new car. It's made out of silver and gold. It has our provincial flower, the wild rose, carved into the handle, bison heads carved into the side, and on the very top we have Canada's national animal, the beaver. But what has to be my favorite part are the gemstones along the crown. When they made this mace, they wanted to do something very fun and unique, so they created a secret code with these stones. If you take the first letter of each stone, you spell out the province's name. So we have an amethyst, lazurite, bloodstone, emerald, ruby, topaz, and agate. Alberta. Pretty fun, hey? So that's our current mace. But if we got it in 1956, what were we using before that? Well, before we got the fancy gold one, we had this one here. Now this mace might not look as fancy as the gold one, but it was also made out of interesting materials. You see, in 1906, when our province was young and going to meet for the very first time, our assembly forgot that they should have a mace. And like I said, the mace represents the monarchy and our power as a people. So it's a pretty big deal. Eventually, someone realized that they needed a mace, 2 weeks before they were going to meet for the very first time. Now, that's not a lot of time to make something as beautiful and well crafted as a mace. The gold one took 6 months. But they eventually found a man named Rufus E. Butterworth. He was a carpenter by trade, and he thought that he could do the job. Now, Butterworth did not have gold or silver or gemstones, so he had to improvise. He used whatever scrap materials he could find to get the job done. Now, we don't know the exact materials he used, but it's believed that he used a plumbing pipe, handles from a cup that you would mix shaving cream in, parts from an old bedstead, wood, a piece of cushion, and possibly for the round part here, a toilet float. So yes, our first mace, our symbol of authority and power, was made with scrap materials. Pretty ingenious, if I say so myself. The last item that we're going to look at is the black rod. Now, if we were a bicameral legislature, meaning we had 2 houses like a Senate, then we would use the black rod instead of the mace. But since we are a unicameral legislature with 1 house, we use the black rod for a very specific purpose. When the Queen or her provincial representative, the Lieutenant Governor, wants to enter our provincial chamber, they have to ask permission first. So on those special occasions for speech from the throne or royal assent, our Sergeant-at-Arms will lead the Lieutenant Governor while holding the black rod and then knock on the doors to the chambers with this end here. Once the doors are open, the Sergeant-at-Arms asks the Speaker if they will permit entry to the Lieutenant Governor, and when entry is permitted, they proceed with the event.
Sergeant-at-Arms, admit Her Honor, the Honorable the Lieutenant Governor.
So now that you've learned about the mace and black rod, we're going to take you to the first stop that the Sergeant-at-Arms and Speaker make during their procession, the chamber doors.
Here we have our main chamber doors. As we've mentioned, the chamber is the room where the Legislative Assembly meets to debate all of the laws that govern the province of Alberta. On and around the chamber doors, you can see lots of our provincial symbols, including a few versions of our provincial crest, that shield shape that you also see on our flag. The crest features the St. George Cross on top, an English flag that served lots of different purposes, but here it was used as a symbol by the Hudson's Bay Company. Underneath the cross, we have some of the landscape of Alberta. Mountains, foothills, prairies, and then all along the bottom, we have sheaves of wheat. You can see a lot of sheaves of wheat throughout the legislature building. Given our province's agricultural history, it's become one of our major symbols. You can see another version of our crest up above the doors as part of our coat of arms. Surrounding the crest, we have 3 different animals. Up top, under the crown, we have a beaver, symbol of Canada and representing our history with the fur trade. To the left, we have a lion representing the British monarchy. And to the right, representing the province itself, we have the pronghorn antelope. Now, they are a native species to the province of Alberta, but you don't find them running around the legislature grounds here. They live a little bit further south, closer to the US border. One fun fact about the pronghorn, although this doesn't really relate to the province, is that although it may look like a deer, the pronghorn is actually related to the giraffe. So there you go, our Alberta equivalent of the majestic giraffe. Underneath these animals, we have another big provincial symbol, that is the wild rose, our provincial flower. That's another image that you'll see throughout the legislature building, including right above our heads on the ceiling in this alcove. Finishing off the coat of arms, we've got our Latin motto for the province, Fortis et Liber, which means strong and free. It's something we've taken from the national anthem, and it's also sort of a hope for the province. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for, let's check out the chamber itself.
This is the room in the Alberta Legislature where all the action happens. It's really the heart of the building. We have a lot to show you in here, so let's get started. While a law is being debated, and before it is given royal assent by the Lieutenant Governor, we call it a bill. The process of debating and refining a bill is called session. To make sure that session runs smoothly, we have a position called the Speaker of the House. This person sits in the chair at the head of the room and acts as a kind of moderator or a referee. Essentially, they make sure that everybody in the chamber follows the rules. For more detailed information about the Speaker of the House, their role and responsibilities, check out the video section dedicated to that position. To the Speaker's right sits the government. The government is formed by whatever political party wins the most seats in the last election. The current government is formed by the United Conservative Party. Sitting across from the government is the opposition. The opposition can actually be made up of multiple political parties depending on how the votes fall during an election. But the political party that wins the second most votes overall forms the official opposition. The current official opposition is formed by the New Democratic Party. This long table in the center is where the clerk and table officers sit. These people are often legal experts, and they help with the writing and editing of new laws, and they also assist the speaker in maintaining order during session. At this end of the table right here, this dark green cushion is where the Sergeant-at-Arms places the mace. Once the mace touches that green cushion, session can officially begin for the day, and then the Sergeant-at-Arms returns to his chair by the chamber doors. Not including the seats for the clerks and table officers and the Sergeant-at-Arms, there are 87 seats in the chamber, one for every elected member of the Legislative Assembly. These members, or MLAs, are the people that Albertans vote for during a provincial election. They come from all regions of the province, as well as all backgrounds. And because it would be impossible for every single Albertan citizen to come to this building to create laws together, the MLAs act as representatives for every individual in their region. Because the MLAs represent you, you are always more than welcome to watch session. And you can do that in one of the two galleries. The gallery above the opposition is called the Members Gallery, and the identical gallery on the opposite side of the chamber is called the Public Gallery. If the Assembly is in session, these galleries are always open to the public. You don't need to call ahead and reserve a spot, you don't need to pay, and you can come and go as you please so long as you remain quiet. Keep in mind, however, that you are only allowed to watch in these galleries. Things like heckling and applause are not permitted. For information about hours that the Assembly is sitting, you can check out our website. If you can't make it to watch session in person, you can watch it on TV, on various social media platforms, or through our website. The cameras you see recessed into the walls record session from start to finish every single day. Also, every word said in the chamber is recorded and then typed up into an official document called Hansard, which is also released to the public. There are a couple other galleries in the room here. Above the speaker's chair, we have the Media Gallery. This is, of course, reserved for media representatives and journalists so they can take notes during session. On the opposite side of the room, above the Sergeant-at-Arms, we have the Speaker's Gallery. This gallery is reserved for guests invited by the Speaker of the House. For example, the Speaker often invites veterans to sit in this gallery close to Remembrance Day as a way to honor them for their service. The two pieces of art you see hanging in the Speaker's Gallery and the Media Gallery are the newest additions to the chamber. In English, they are called Sunrise and Sunset, and they were commissioned from the renowned Alex Janvier, a Dene-Sulin artist from the Cold Lake First Nations. One of the things we believe they highlight is the fact that Treaties 6, 7, and 8 are legal, binding agreements so long as the sun shines, the grass grows, and the river flows. The other prominent piece of art we see in the chamber is the stained glass of Princess Louise, the woman our province was named after. For more detailed information about the princess, check out the video section dedicated to her. From here, we're going to move on and learn a little bit more about a role I touched on briefly in this video, the Speaker of the House.
Next, we're going to talk about an important figure in the Alberta legislature, the Speaker of the House. Now behind me, you can see some past speakers of our province, and in their portraits, you can see that they're wearing traditional court-styled robes. This is because their role is actually similar to that of a judge. They are the head of the legislative branch of our government, and they make sure that the debates and the proceedings happen in an orderly and fair way. You can sort of think of them like a referee of the Assembly. They moderate the debates, and they make sure that both sides get a chance to speak. So now that you know a little bit about what they do, the next question might be, how do they get their job? Well, it's actually pretty simple. After a general election, every MLA has an opportunity to be nominated to become the Speaker of the Assembly. However, only a select few will ever get this honor. And after the list of nominees is approved and they accept their nominations, then every MLA participates in a secret ballot vote. This means that no one knows who you voted for, so you're free to vote for whoever you think will be the best Speaker of the province. Now, a fun Westminster tradition that we follow is, once a Speaker is officially chosen, the Premier and the leader of the official opposition will grab the Speaker and forcibly drag them to the Speaker's chair. This tradition comes from a time in British history when the role of the Speaker was not necessarily a safe one. You see, the Speaker used to actually have to report the proceedings of Parliament directly to the King. And if the King didn't like what the Speaker told him, well, let's just say that this is a time when you didn't want to make the King angry. So it's said that speakers of old used to hide in their homes, only going to the chamber when they were forcibly dragged to do so. Now, luckily today, the role of the Speaker is a safe one, and they are free to approach the position with the respect and honor that the title deserves. Next, we're going to show you a place that you normally don't get to see on tour, shown to you by the Speaker of the Assembly himself, the Honourable Nathan Cooper.
Hi, Speaker Cooper here, and I hope you're enjoying the tour of Alberta's legislature building. Right now, you're in room 400, and room 400 is actually the Speaker Suite. And when legislatures were built all across the country, often it was very difficult to travel to the capital. And so one of the benefits of being the Speaker is that they provided a permanent residence for the Speaker, and that's the room that we're in right now. It's not currently used as a permanent residence. Certainly I don't use it as that. And the last permanent residence was actually in the 1990s, early 90s, when Speaker Carter was the Speaker. He, in fact, was the last permanent resident here. The other very unique thing that happened here is Speaker Dawson. He's the longest serving Speaker, over 26 years. He actually died right here in the suite. It's said that the then health minister, who was an actual doctor, attended to him here in the suite. Some believe that he still visits the suite late at night when it's very quiet, that he can be seen sitting at this very table. I don't know, it's conjecture and hearsay to me. I've never seen Speaker Dawson, but some say that's the truth. The official record say that he actually died on the way to the hospital, but I think the official record was just to make folks feel a little more comfortable when coming into the suite at the time. This is a great space. One of the things that we also use it for, because it's not a permanent residence, is that the Speaker actually has a bunch of official duties, and they are often hosting dignitaries, often ambassadors from other nations or council generals, and that they want to build a trade relationship here with the province of Alberta, and so they want to have an official visit. Sometimes they have that with the Premier or the Lieutenant Governor, but if they are unable, then often the Speaker will fulfill that duty. To have that first official visit, they then go on to have meetings with other government officials after that's taken place. That's the primary purpose of this space right here, is hosting dignitaries and others who are visiting the province of Alberta. Thanks so much for joining us on the tour. Not too many people know about this space, but I'm glad that we were able to share it with you today on the tour.
Up here on the 5th floor, we have our gallery dedicated to the Famous Five. They were a group of 5 Alberta women who helped to fight to include women within the legal definition of persons. There was a time when the only people who legally counted as persons were white men over the age of 30 who owned a certain amount of property. This meant that, among other things, people outside of that definition, including women, were not eligible to be appointed to the Canadian Senate. Emily Murphy was the first female police magistrate in the British Commonwealth. She was appointed to that job in 1916, which happened to be the same year that women in Alberta won the right to vote in provincial elections. But because Murphy was not legally considered a person, her appearance in court was often challenged. In 1922, a group of activists were pushing for Emily Murphy to be appointed to the Canadian Senate. But this compelled the government to come forward and say that due to the definitions in the British North America Act, essentially the Canadian Constitution, Emily Murphy did not count as a qualified person and therefore couldn't be appointed. In 1927, Emily Murphy gathered together a group of women, later to be known as the Famous Five. This group included herself, Henrietta Muir Edwards, Irene Parlby, Louise McKinney, and Nellie McClung. These women put together a petition to take to the Supreme Court of Canada asking whether or not the definition of persons included female persons. And what did the Supreme Court say? No. Now, the Supreme Court is the highest court within Canada. So in order to take this case any further, these women actually had to travel to England to speak to a group known as the Privy Council. This isn't an option anymore for Canadian citizens, as we've gained more independence from England. But at the time, if you were turned down by the Supreme Court, the Privy Council of the United Kingdom was your last chance. In 1929, these 5 women brought a refined version of their petition over to England to the Privy Council, asking the Privy Council, do women count in the definition of persons? And what did the Privy Council say? Yes. In fact, Lord John Sankey, who is the head of the Privy Council, mentioned that the days when women were excluded from these public offices is a relic of days far more barbarous than ours. And to those who ask, why should we include women? I say, why should we not? So finally, the Famous Five had won their case, what later came to be known as the Persons Case, and women were eligible to be appointed to the Canadian Senate. In fact, the year after the case, in 1930, Corrine Wilson became the first Canadian female senator. Unfortunately, Emily Murphy never got the chance, but I'm sure she was content with the fact that they won this case and changed that piece of the Canadian Constitution. Now, it's worth mentioning that this was just one fight for equality that has been fought in Canada. Many women and men were still not given full, equal legal status after the Persons Case, and it took much more time and much more effort to start including everyone within the legal definition of persons. So this can be seen as a starting point to expand our definition and include everyone within the considerations of the Canadian Constitution. Well, there you have it. On behalf of myself, Silverius, and Matthew, we want to thank you so much for joining us for this online video tour, and we hope to see you in person sometime in the near future.
Hi, my name is Andrew Bachenko, and I'm MLA for Drayton Valley, Devon. Drayton Valley, Devon has diverse businesses and amazing people. We have oil, gas, we have agricultural business in our riding. And what I love about my constituency is diversity of geography, awesome, amazing people there, and just a beautiful scenery that goes from the rivers to lakes to valleys. Very beautiful community, and I'm proud to be representing that community of Drayton Valley, Devon constituency. As a Malay, I love that I have opportunity to interact to everyday constituents in my riding. Sometimes meeting people on the street, sometimes walking into stores, and I love the opportunity to advocate for those people. I admire our government right now for the work we do to not only help our constituency, but the Alberta in general. When I'm not busy with being a Malay and working for our community, for our province, I really truly love and enjoy spending time with my family. We go for the hikes, for walks at the river valley. I love also playing golf with my kids. My family time in my downtime, what I really truly like to do.